Gotta give a big shout out to Cubic Games. They've still got their 17th anniversary sale going on, and basically you need to own one of these 4 titles. One of them's free. If you do, you can get some ridiculous prices, like 17 cents for most of the games they have on the sale. Also, please craft those most normal of comments so that we can reply with a free copy of something, maybe one of our avoids this week. Check those out at the end of the video. I'll pop a link to our coverage of the entire sale if you want to go and see what you can get before it finishes in a few days. With that said, this week we are going to look predominantly at JRPGs because Square Enix or Enix are blessing us with a massive discount on most of their games, which is really fitting because I just started the Final Fantasy VII Remake this week on the PS5 and it's got me all nostalgic. So with that said, what's on sale? Well, let's find out. First up then, it's got to be Final Fantasy VII, which is 50% off until the 24th of March. That takes it down to £6.39. I remember coming home from school when I was about 8 years old and seeing my brother playing this on his original PlayStation, hooked up to our glorious 14-inch CRT TV. If you don't know what that is, just imagine a cardboard box with a screen. And it's about as functional, to be fair. But Final Fantasy VII, despite its aging looks, is an incredible experience. It's funny because despite all its visual flair, the remake is so close to that original experience, mainly for me because it sticks to the original musical score, albeit slightly souped up version. If you can get past what I guess is a slightly clunkier visual than you'd be used to on a modern JRPG, I can guarantee after 50 to 100 hours, if you want to do everything, you'll have experienced something truly epic. It's got an incredibly likeable cast, some excellent cutscenes, and a download size of 3.8 gigs, so it's not actually particularly large. And as mentioned, that goes on until March the 24th. I think there's potentially an argument to be made that Final Fantasy VIII, the Remastered edition, and I use remastered in air quotes because, let's be honest, they haven't really changed a great deal, but Final Fantasy VIII is one of the more underrated Final Fantasy titles. When it came out, I remember absolutely loving it, and then reading in my game magazine that yeah, they didn't really rate it nearly as highly as I did. It's set in the Republic of Galbadia, which is under the influence of the sorceress Edea, or Edie, and you play as Squall, who, yeah, he's a little bit emo, but I really enjoyed playing as him, and I thought it was overall an excellent game. I was delighted when it finally arrived back on the Switch, as there was a bit of an issue, wasn't there, with some source code going missing at Square, and it has all of those battle assist options that you definitely don't want to use, other than maybe the speed boost just to speed those random encounters up a bit, but don't switch them off because it's not Final Fantasy then, is it? You're looking again at about 50 to 80 hours to do everything, and again quite a reasonable download of 3.06 gigs. It's 50% off until March the 24th. Jump forward a few decades then, and you've got Trials of Mana, which was released in April 2020. This is a reimagining with some lovely action RPG combat. It's very easy to pick up and play, the characters are all likeable, they do a really good job with the visuals on Switch, and if you played the original 1995 classic Seiken Densetsu 3, you're going to feel right at home here. There's loads of returns of familiar characters, obviously, but their 2020 updates look delightful. You get to play as several of the different characters, and there's optional backstory that you can go through, and the updated soundtrack is excellent. It's nice that they added a new episode which is available after you complete the game, and the character choices you make will have a big impact on that combat. I know Glen's recently finished this one and he really enjoyed it. It's not going to set the world on fire, but it's a very familiar and enjoyable RPG experience. It's also reasonably short in comparison to some of the others at around 30 to 40 hours. It's 40% off, and as with the others, that sale goes on until March the 24th. I slept on World of Final Fantasy Maxima for quite some time, and I can't remember what it was that actually made me pick it up in the end, but it wasn't what I was expecting at all. It has a very cool shift in visual styles. You have the chibi and the, in air quotes, more realistic styles, and you transition between the two depending on which world you're in, I believe, if I recall correctly. It has a bit of a Pokemon feel to it as well. You can capture different monsters which are known as mirages, and I guess this might be for someone that perhaps doesn't like the traditional Final Fantasy games and is looking for something a little bit different. It's still pretty epic in length though, at around 50 to 100 hours long, and it looks delightful on Switch. It's certainly one of the better looking games. You're looking at a 10.7 gigabyte download. It's 50% off, and that sale goes on as the others till March the 24th. Here's one that I didn't want to enjoy, really, because of its mobile roots, and it's Final Fantasy XV, the Pocket Edition HD. As I said there, it was originally released in episodic chunks, and was obviously based on the full Final Fantasy XV release, and follows closely that storyline, but in a very different visual style, similar to the old Final Fantasy games, and it's quite linear as well. I didn't want to enjoy it, but I really did. Actually, it was quite a tight experience. There's some good boss fights in here. You have to be aware that it is much more linear than some Final Fantasy games, but there's a good time to be had. At 50% off, that's quite reasonable. It's not one that I'd suggest paying full price for, but it's certainly an interesting one at this price. As with most Final Fantasy games, there's a number of different kingdoms fighting each other, but where it really shines is the friendship and camaraderie between the group of friends that you see for the most part on screen. It's 5.3 gigs to download, and it's reasonably short at around about 15 to 20 hours. It's the lowest price it's ever been at £12.50 or your regional equivalent. I'm going to attempt to finish this list with 5 physical games that are on ridiculously good price drops and hopefully available in both regions, so the US and the UK. If they're not, then I'll let you know. But let's start off with one that I actually only managed to do recently, and I say recently, in the last couple of years, and it's Planescape Torment and Icewind Dale, the enhanced editions, which, if you're not aware of the Baldur's Gate series, were almost spin-offs to those games, but had very similar mechanics, but they were brutally difficult. It comes from developer Beamdog, and they are well worth your time. They're currently 51% off at Amazon in the UK and US and potentially some other regions, but they are excellent games and really well worth adding to your collection. As the title suggests, you have to journey deep into Icewind Dale, which is a harsh and unforgiving territory filled with hideous creatures, and it's been contaminated by an evil that you have to help destroy. It's nice to finally be able to talk about Digimon Cyber Sleuth, which you can buy physically over on Amazon US for 60% off, but it's also on the Eshop in the UK store. It was just stupidly expensive when it launched, so it didn't get many mentions from, well, many people, to be honest. But it's actually a really solid game that, again, as so often seems to be the case at the moment, has a lot of Pokemon about it, but potentially done a little bit better than some of the more modern Pokemon releases. There are more than 300 Digimon to collect. You can then train them up and digivolve them, and this complete edition is actually a surprisingly solid and enjoyable experience. It has a download size of 4.7 gigs and a ludicrous amount of time to beat. Like, if you want to try and finish and do everything, you're looking at over 100 hours, and there is an online battle mode as well. If you like your RPG experiences a little bit more serious, shall we say, then the Tokyo RPG Factory, published again by Square Enix, released Oninaki, which was the third game in the trilogy that saw I Am Setsuna and Lost Sphere precede it. And again, it's one that we've reviewed on the channel, but it is standalone. You don't really need to have played those other games to enjoy this. You essentially, and in quite a cool storyline really, play as like the death police. When someone dies, sometimes their spirit's not at rest, so you can traverse to the other side and try and resolve the issues that are keeping them where they are. The pacing, maybe around about the halfway towards the end, gets a little bit iffy, like it stretches as they so often do in these games, but the combat I really enjoyed. I liked the world and the characters, and I just thought it was an interesting premise. The music's also very cool. You can take on the form of these different demons which have their own abilities, but there's also a leveling hub that shows the branching paths you can take them in with a number of unique skills. They might not be for everyone, but check out our review of it if you're interested. It's only 3.1 gigs, and it's going to take you around about 30 or 40 hours to complete and do everything. That's 50% off until March the 24th. Then we've got one that unfortunately I believe is only available in the US region, but it's such a good game, and also I would tend to get this over the sequel, which is Torchlight 3. So Torchlight 2, which we've looked at on the channel before, is an excellent game. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, you can get a pet unicorn. Is that right? I'm sure you can get a pet unicorn on the Switch version. It's a very fast-paced top-down action RPG. You can play co-op with 4 players online, but strangely not on the same console, which is a bit of a letdown compared to something like Diablo. But you'll be customizing your character. There's a very large world to work your way through, and there's also a new game plus mode for extra content after you've finished. To complete, it's going to take around 20 to 30 hours, but if you want to do everything, then much longer. Has a download size of 2.0 gigs, and at 40% off, you'll have to be pretty quick on this one because it's only available until March the 17th. Finally then, and I briefly mentioned it at the start there, the Cubic Games 17th anniversary sale is still on for like 2 more days, 2 or 3 or 4. What's the date today? 14. Like 3 more days. And I'm just going to put on screen some of the amazing titles that you can pick up for literal pennies, including Akane, Mana Spark, Blazing Beaks, Dex, which is awesome, has to be said. And for a little bit more, like £1 something, a couple of quid, you've got the newly released Door Kickers game, which is a top-down tactical experience. Yeah, great little gems, and for like peanuts. So do click that link in the top description to go and watch our video that covers all of those and potentially spend money. Oh dear. Right, let's have a look at a couple of games that you should avoid because they smell like toe funk. Ugh. And the first one actually comes as a suggestion from my daughter, who absolutely loves DreamWorks Dragons. In fact, I love DreamWorks Dragons. I think it's a very kid and adult friendly series and set of films, but the DreamWorks Dragons Dawn of New Riders game is just rubbish. They could have made it amazing. Imagine like an open world one where you go and train dragons and build up like your tribe and stuff. That would have been quality, but no, this is very on rails, very linear. And when a 6-year-old turns around and says, nah, this isn't very good, Daddy, you have to listen to her, for she is wise indeed, and it shall enter the avoids list. It's currently 60% off, so yeah, I mean, if you're very not picky, then you might find some enjoyment here, but for everyone else, it's an avoid. Sometimes the internet has already done your job for you, and I've only played a couple of rounds of Jumanji, and yeah, let's just quote a few reviewers on Metacritic because I think they've just said it a lot better than me. JEO says the graphics on the Switch are terrible and there's also no online. Disappointing. Detective Donut says if you enjoy absolute dumpster fires of licensed games, then this is the perfect game for you. While The Gamer, who is a professional critic, writes Jumanji, the video game, is best left in that dark and dusty cupboard that it will no doubt end up in. So there you go. Job done. That's it for this week. Let me know down in the comments, are you picking up any games, or are you tightly holding on to your cash monies waiting for some of the awesome releases that are coming over the next couple of days and weeks, including Monster Hunter Rise, which, oh my goodness, I am so excited for. I am smiling sat here thinking about it, and Kingdoms of Amalur, which I'm working my way through for the second time, and I'm not allowed to say am I because it's under embargo, but our review will be out on Tuesday. As always, do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it, do leave comments, and hopefully we'll be able to reply to some of those, giving away some codes, perhaps Jumanji, who knows. For all things Switch, oh, and a big thanks to our patrons. We really do appreciate you guys. You help support us in those dark and dingy times. Dark and what am I talking about? For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!